Welcome into 5 Wide Fantasy. Today's video, must start and sit wide receivers for week 13 of the fantasy season. We're coming to you a few days early here. We're going to cover each and every matchup Thursday through Monday on the NFL slate, tell you which receivers you should start, which receivers you should sit. If you guys enjoyed the video, be sure to drop a like, subscribe to the channel if you enjoyed, and as always, comment down below with any players you're considering starting or sitting. Happy to help out as much as I can, but as well, we're always live. We're live every day at 12:30 on Twitch. We're also live on Sunday mornings, so if you guys want to come hang out with us there, we answer as many questions as we can there as well. And Thursday Night Football, great game. Bills, Patriots. You know, I'm always looking to place a bet over at BetFred, who, when you sign up, they're going to be able to bet $50, and they're going to match it with $250 in free bets. So if you sign up at the link below, register, make a deposit of at least $50, bet $50, $250 in free bets. Honestly, though, I am staying away from this game. Been going through the matchup, trying to decide if there's any side I like, any total I like, any props I like. But the Bills are dealing with a flu bug, so I have concerns of like how healthy these guys are going to be, who's going to play, who's not going to play. This line has come down 2 points since opening from 5.5 to 3.5. So if you guys do like the Bills at -3.5, or maybe the Patriots at home as underdogs at +3.5, make sure you're going to bet it over at BetFred. Again, go sign up. The link is down below. Let's get to these matchups, starting with Thursday Night Football. Bills, Patriots. Starting with the Patriots side of things, offensively for the Patriots, Ramondre Stevenson has just been an absolute animal, not just on the ground, but through the air as well. Mac Jones has looked really good the last few weeks, honestly. Like, he's been really efficient in the pass game. They've been moving the ball decently well through the air. They had a great game against the Vikings. Hoping that can continue here this week. Jacoby Myers, though, I believe he's dealing with like a rib injury of some sort. He's been practicing in a limited fashion. It's early in the week, so I don't have a ton of practice information, but I wouldn't really look to be playing any of these guys. I know the Bills, in terms of fantasy points allowed, are 25th, but they're 7th in pass DVOA, have a really good pass rush, and they got a good coverage group. So I would probably avoid playing any Patriots wide receivers in this matchup. There's a few different options they have that they're going to, including Hunter Henry as well, developing now, that I'm not sure where I'm going to find a lot of value this week from the Patriots. On the Bills side of things, I know I mentioned Isaiah McKenzie as a player I'm not really looking to add, but if you do already have him on your roster and you are in a deeper league, we have seen McKenzie actually perform decently well against man coverage. That's what the Patriots play a ton of. We did see Stephon Diggs struggle last week against the Lions, who play a lot of man coverage. So if you're in a deeper league, I don't think Isaiah McKenzie is a bad play. But otherwise, Stephon Diggs is always a quality start. I'm not really very excited about Gabe Davis. Again, he did not stick out last week against man coverage against the Lions. But when this team gets in the red zone, he is a constant target for them. Next game up, Titans-Eagles. A very big matchup probably for both of these teams, but definitely so for the Titans, looking to get back on track. I think I have this game pretty well pegged out. If you look at the Titans side of things, the option, of course, is playing Treylon Burks against an Eagles secondary that has been really good this year, but did give up a pretty decent game to Christian Watson this past week. But the thing is we've seen the Eagles be able to be run on, and I expect the Titans to do that quite a bit. We saw the Packers run the ball really well against the Eagles, produce a lot of fantasy points from both of their backs, so I expect that to be the case with Derrick Henry. So I'm a little bit worried about Treylon Burks on the outside, matching up with Darius Slay. I don't trust him very much in this matchup. He is definitely someone I want to avoid starting. I know he's been really, really solid. His week kind of was saved by the Derrick Henry fumble, so I would say move forward with caution with him. This would be a week I'd probably look to avoid playing him, but of course I want to hang on to him. Packers-Bears. We did have Aaron Rodgers on the Pat McAfee show this week. Said, the results came back good in terms of his checks, and it looks like he's going to play. He says he's going to play this week. I'd be surprised if he misses time, especially with Rodgers going against the Bears, a team that he always takes advantage of and is usually able to handle quite easily. But we did see him leave that game and not be able to make throws down the field. Like, all of his work was check down, screen plays. I'm a little worried of how healthy he's going to be for this game, but if he says he's going to play, LaFleur's not going to sit him. So even if this season is really out of reach for these guys in terms of the postseason, I wouldn't be looking to play Christian Watson, or especially not Alan Lazard, who's just been an absolute dud since Christian Watson has emerged. I see Watson as a risky play. The Bears coverage unit has not been good lately, so Watson could still be, someone you might consider playing or might need to play and might want to play from the touchdown upside perspective. I'd play him over Treylon Burks, but I think it's very risky because I do think the Packers will kind of demolish the Bears on the ground. The Bears have been pretty bad against opposing running backs this season, so that is really how I see this game breaking down. Next game, we've got the Jags and the Lions, two teams that have been very, very helpful to opposing wide receivers. The Jags 24th in fantasy points allowed, the Lions 29th in fantasy points allowed. So two good matchups for these passing offenses. And I'll start quickly with the Lions. The Lions, there's really no other decision to make, or no decision to make with this team because it's really just Amon-Ra St. Brown, and that's it. But on the Jaguars side, you could have potentially added Zay Jones, even though I don't think he was a worthy add. But if you were one of those players like I mentioned, or those fantasy managers like I mentioned, that do need a win and need a couple wins to make the playoffs, then he could have been a better add for you. He's just not a guy late season. His matchups are pretty bad. That's why I didn't like him. But a matchup against the Lions, I do think he is potentially like a playable asset. I do still see Christian Kirk as the number one wide receiver in this offense. But Jones could have some success on the outside against the Lions in which would be a competitive game. So if you're looking at I'd probably rather play Zay Jones than Treylon Burks and Christian Watson if you're looking for guys to compare. Browns-Texans, the return of Deshaun Watson. I mentioned that I think Deshaun Watson will be a league winner and he's going to elevate this entire offense. We talked about in the running back rankings video that I am very high on this ground game for the Browns, being with the fact that the Texans are dead last in fantasy points allowed to running backs. But they're not great in coverage either. But they have been a top 7 unit in fantasy points allowed to wide receivers. But I do think that's because they're getting crushed on the ground. Nobody even bothers to throw the ball too much on them. So I still think Amari Cooper is definitely someone you want to play here in this matchup with Deshaun Watson finally being back. I do still think you can play Donovan Peoples-Jones here. I would play DPJ over Christian Watson, Treylon Burks, and Zay Jones. Just such a plus matchup, and with Watson back. Actually, I'll take it back on the Zay Jones side. I'd probably rather play Zay Jones just because it's a little bit of a question mark of how pass heavy they're going to be with this plus running matchup. But Amari Cooper, I would definitely look to play after I mentioned sitting him last week. On the Texans side, you're not playing anybody. Kyle Allen's at QB. We're going to see this Texans team run the ball with Dameon Pierce in a really plus matchup for their ground game. And with Kyle Allen at quarterback, I can't trust either of Nico Collins or Brandon Cooks. There's just not enough here in terms of proof of what this offense looks like with him under center. And then we saw last week all of his output came in garbage time. I think 160 yards of his 230 came when they were down 30-0. So I can't. Unfortunately for Brandon Cooks, this team has some plus matchups in the fantasy playoffs for wide receivers, but right now that just doesn't seem to matter. Jets, Vikings matchup I'm very, very excited about. Now with Mike White at quarterback for the Jets, going up against a Vikings secondary that has been pretty bad this year, but they've got an excellent pass rush. Have a pass rush grade, if you guys can see it on your screen, 73.8, and that's a problem for the Jets, who have a terrible, terrible offensive line. Could that be an issue for Mike White in this game? I'm looking still. Garrett Wilson is definitely a guy I'm wanting to start. I expect him to still be productive in this matchup, even if Mike White's struggling to get the ball out. But those other options I'm going to stay away from. But I do think the Jets will need to throw the ball because the Vikings have a really good front that can stop the run as well. But it's really just Garrett Wilson that I want to play. It's still kind of a guessing game between, where's Elijah Moore's usage going to be at? It hasn't increased in since his usage hasn't really changed since he's came back from leaving the team back in week 7 or whatever it was. So really just Garrett Wilson for me, especially with these tight ends being involved as well. On the Vikings side, we got Justin Jefferson matching up with Sauce Gardner. That's going to be one of the best matchups of the weekend. We're not going to be sitting Justin Jefferson even in this really difficult matchup. But the Jets secondary and their pass defense has been elite. Top 5 in DVOA. Top 5 in cover. I think they have the number 1 coverage grade from PFF. Pass rush has been great, and they're 4th in fantasy points allowed to wide receivers. So there's really not a reason to be playing an Adam Thielen in this matchup, in my mind. So I would definitely be looking to sit him here. Steelers, Falcons. What do we got? The Steelers 32nd in fantasy points allowed to wide receivers, and the Falcons 30th. We would consider these plus matchups for both of these passing offenses. My concern is, though, with TJ Watt back, this Steelers defense has changed drastically in terms of their efficiency and their output. They're only going to improve in this category because of their pass rush. Like, their pass rush is a bottom 10 grade from PFF, and they're like a middle of the pack in DVOA. But being able to hit a guy on the outside like Drake London is going to be tough if Marcus Mariota doesn't have much time to throw the football. We could see the Falcons lean on the ground game quite a bit here because of that, because of their pass protection. So I still think Drake London is a serviceable flex option. But what I'm not looking to do is have expectations of being a top 24 wide receiver on the week. So I'd play him over guys like Zay Jones, Christian Watson, Treylon Burks, just because I see him having the potential of some good volume as the number one. But that's really as far as I'll go with London on the week. And I'm not really looking to go to any of these other options like Zacchaeus or anyone like that in this matchup against the Steelers. Falcons defense, or the Steelers offense going against the Falcons defense. Now that's some plus matchups. I liked what I saw from Kenny Pickett on Monday. I thought he was pretty solid. We've seen George Pickens continue to elevate his play and looking like honestly emerging to be this number one guy in the Steelers offense. If you want to play him, I would be about it. Like, he's posted 40 plus yards in a number of weeks in a row now. This is the chance for a big breakout against the Falcons defense that's just graded out terribly in coverage, in their pass rush, in their fantasy points, in their DVOA. So definitely I would be looking to play George Pickens and even Deontay Johnson if the right matchup or right decision lines up for you. So definitely drop those in the comments, and I'm happy to kind of compare from a few different players. Broncos, Ravens. Broncos, what do we do? Courtland Sutton is still getting volume. It's early in the week, so I don't know what Jerry Jeudy's status is. The Ravens have been they're getting better defensively. They're 8th in DVOA, but they still are 26th in fantasy points allowed to wide receivers. So this still could be a plus matchup for the Broncos pass game that hasn't shown us much of anything. But man, the thing is, as inefficient as this offense has been, Russ is throwing so many deep balls. And we've seen this Ravens team get beat over the top a number of times this season. I'm thinking that Dolphins game early in the year as well. So I do think Courtland Sutton, if Jerry Jeudy isn't available, is someone you do have to start. If both of them are playing, then that's where I drop them into more of that wide receiver 3 tier. But again, Jeudy's status, I'm not so sure about. So probably a wait and see until near the end of the week there, and we can answer some more questions on the Twitch channel on Sunday. Ravens side of things, there's really not much to talk about. The Broncos defense is fantastic. 2nd in fantasy points allowed to wide receivers. I'm not playing any wide receiver on the Ravens this week. I expect them to probably use the ground game a fair bit against the Broncos, who have a much different run defense than they do a pass defense. Commanders, Giants. Starting on the Giants side of things offensively, the Commanders have been improving drastically week over week in their coverage, in their pass defense. We're looking at them now as a top 10 unit both in their pass rush and their coverage grade. 21st in fantasy points allowed. Nobody can run on this team. So what do you do about the potential of, like, if I have a guy like Darius Slayton? He would be, in my mind, like a wide receiver 4. We're seeing the Giants play at such a slow pace. I do see Slayton as the number one option for this team, but there's still like a Richie James in the slot type of option. James being in that slot role seems to have a bit more value. We saw Wan'Dale Robinson perform well in that role too. So honestly, if you're in a really deep league, I could definitely see you playing Slayton, but any of your traditional 12-teamers, unless you have DeAndre Hopkins and Marquise Brown on your team, I just can't see a situation where you're probably wanting to go to either one of those, go to Slayton in any of your matchups, really. Dolphins 49ers as we move over into the 4 o'clock slate here. Great game. Excited for this matchup. What do we do here between these two teams? Offensively, for the Dolphins, I always say this, again, another scenario where it's just not really a decision to be made. We're going to play Waddle. We're going to play Tyreek Hill against this 49ers defense, even though it's been really, really good this year. Defensively, have a really good coverage grade, 84.2, top 10 in DVOA, but not much to talk about on that side. On the other side, though, for the 49ers, running the ball is going to be very tough against this Dolphins team. I think they're going to have a difficult time. Now they're less Elijah Mitchell, so it's really just Christian McCaffrey in the backfield, maybe some Jordan Mason, who knows. But the wide receivers I'm definitely firing away on because I don't trust this Dolphins secondary to make plays defensively. So I would definitely look to play Brandon Ayuk, Deebo Samuel, George Kittle obviously as well. So I like playing the 49ers wide receivers here. This game should be honestly a little bit more pass happy than people might think. especially when you got McDaniel and Shanahan going head-to-head. You'd expect to be a little bit more run-heavy coming from that same scheme. Seahawks, Rams. Man, we can't really talk about the Rams too much because with Bryce Perkins or John Wolford at QB, whoever it's going to be, probably Perkins another week, you can't play any of these Rams wide receivers. Seahawks are top 6 in fantasy points allowed to wide receivers. No reason to play Rams guys there. The other side, though, is the Seahawks. Obviously, the Rams' pass defense has been pretty serviceable, starting to trend down as we get later into the year and this team being a little bit less invested. 26th in DVOA, 18th in fantasy points allowed. I would probably, see no reason to be sitting Tyler Lockett or DK Metcalf in this matchup. I do think this team will struggle to run the ball because the Rams, even though they're very, they've been struggling, defensively they can stop the run. They've shown the ability to stop the run all season. They're one of the best units at it. I think they have the number 1 run defense grade from PFF this season. We talked about that in the running back rankings video. So I do like DK Metcalf and Tyler Lockett to put up numbers here and put up some volume in this game. Chiefs, Bengals. We're going to be in attendance. BetFred in the BetFred suite will actually be at this game on Sunday. Very excited for that. We'll have a video dropping on the YouTube shortly after the game, which would be awesome. But this is a very, very big game for the Bengals, keeping track and keeping pace with the Ravens as potentially they could catch them in the AFC North. In terms of these offenses, I do expect, just from the Bengals side of things, I do expect Jamar Chase to probably be back. And if he is, you definitely want to play him, as well as T. Higgins. But if both of them are available, I'm probably putting Tyler Boyd on the bench, even in a matchup with a high betting total. But just with this Chiefs defense is actually grading out pretty well defensively, but they are 28th in fantasy points allowed. So kind of take that with what you will. But I definitely see if Chase is healthy that they'll give him full go. I think that's the reason they've been holding him back, is they want to make sure they can play him to his full extent and full snap load. On the Bengals or Chiefs side of things. Bengals have been a shutdown defense, especially in the second halves. They're 8th in fantasy points allowed, 9th in passing DVOA. What do you do about these Chiefs wide receivers? With Juju back in the fold, I'm definitely looking to play Juju. Sky Moore had a fumble, but did have some really good volume otherwise. I think he had 6 targets or so. I think right now, beyond Juju, there's a lot of back and forth with like him, Watson, Valdez-Scantling, these tight ends they're mixing in as well, that I can't really go and trust anyone else. Like it's Kelsey and Juju, I think, are the 2 big options. So unless you're in a deeper league, you can drop some comments, some questions in the comments about it. I probably wouldn't look to play anyone beyond that, to be honest with you. Chargers, Raiders. Big one for the Chargers. Another one win they need as they head into next week, which will be another primetime game. I don't like seeing my Chargers in primetime this many times. It just gives me too high of anxiety. I don't need to see them continue to play in primetime and everybody tell me that the Chargers are the biggest media darling that can't get anything done in NFL history. So they're short favorites on the road at the Raiders. The Raiders defense has been poor, 32nd in pass DVOA. We watched the Seahawks score a ton of points on them. I don't expect Mike Williams to be back this week, so Josh Palmer is definitely someone you want to play. His volume continues to be great. And now with Keenan Allen back, he's definitely someone you're not looking to sit. On the Raiders side of things, we're looking at not too much beyond Devontae Adams. Honestly, the Chargers are starting to really shape up defensively. Top 10 in fantasy points allowed to wide receivers. They've been getting killed on the ground, and the Raiders will run the ball a ton in this game because they know that. They're familiar with this team. Josh Jacobs coming off like a 30-plus carry game. I expect that to continue. So it's really only Devontae Adams I'd look to play. Just with these secondary options, you might not see enough volume. And honestly, Foster Moreau, in my mind, is the secondary option, and he's at the tight end position. So he's someone I definitely would look to play because he's had some pretty serviceable weeks. He had a touchdown last week. But the other ones beyond that, and Mac Hollins and whatnot, I'm not really looking to. All right, Sunday night, Colts Cowboys. They decided to keep this game in. They didn't flex this game out for some reason. Well, not surprising. America's team and the Cowboys. But for the Colts offensively, obviously going to be some struggles. The Cowboys defense is very, very good, especially in their pass rush. And the Colts have been absolutely brutal in pass pro. I should have known this before I took Alec Pierce's over in receiving yards. I should have remembered how bad this pass pro is. And I think that's going to cause some major problems. I expect the Colts to be on the ground a ton. I know I've been telling you guys about, like, I'm not giving you very much, maybe in these last few games, of like information that's going to change your mind about a player, because Alec Pierce and Paris Campbell are not guys I want to play. You don't want to play the outside option in Pierce, and I don't want to play the secondary, even the secondary option for this offense in Campbell, just because I don't think the passing volume will be high. So that makes Michael Pittman a player I'm not very high on this week either. So if I could give you any really surprising information, maybe not so much surprising because we know how good this defense is, I don't want to play Michael Pittman against the Cowboys, especially with his matchup likely being against Trayvon Diggs. On the Colts side on the Cowboys side of things offensively, the Colts somehow are the number one team in fantasy points allowed to wide receivers. They don't have much of a pass rush, so I don't think Dak's going to have much of a problem moving the ball through the air. And the ground game the ground defense for the Colts is pretty serviceable. So I'm not scared, despite the fact they're the number one team in fantasy points allowed to wide receivers. I'm not worried about playing a Michael Gallup or a CeeDee Lamb here. I do think the Cowboys at home will be able to move the ball through the air. I see Gallup as like a wide receiver 4. He's definitely not like a huge play for me, but CeeDee Lamb I'm not worried about. Last game, Saints-Bucks. Another game here, as we wrap things up, is not a lot of decisions to be made. I did like what I saw from what we saw from Julio Jones last week, a little bit more volume for him against the Browns. In this matchup, though, it's really just Mike Evans, Chris Godwin. Godwin getting some massive volume last week, and his volume's been really solid all year. He just hasn't been able to find the end zone. Finally did last week. So Mike Evans and Chris Godwin are definitely guys I want to play. On the other side, the Bucs pass defense, man, it's really good. Really good. 6th in DVOA, have an 80.4 coverage grade. They're middle of the road in fantasy points allowed, but that's just because they see a lot of teams throw the ball on them. I am very much looking to sit Chris Olave this week. I think the Bucs pass defense is just so good. I know the Saints tend to have the Bucs number, but I do think, like last week, this could be another defensive-minded game. We saw them lose 13-0, couldn't score whatsoever. The Saints offense is just struggling immensely, and I know Chris Olave is that number one option that could potentially have decent volume, but in the matchup against the Bucs pass defense, I'm definitely not looking to play him, so I would be sitting Chris Olave this week. All right, that's each and every matchup for Week 13 of the fantasy season. If you guys enjoyed the video, be sure to let me know by liking, subscribing to the channel, and clicking the link below to go check out our friends over at BetFred. If you sign up, deposit $50, bet $50, they're going to give you $250 in free bets. So if you're in Colorado, Louisiana, Iowa, where am I missing? Pennsylvania, Arizona, any of those states, they're there. Go sign up and collect an awesome offer from our friends at BetFred. Thank you guys for watching, and we'll see you next time.